My goal is to help empower OTs to step into this if they feel called to. And I'm going to do that by pushing the envelope myself as well.
Yes, yes. So there's that powerful mission for you that drives you, that this isn't just about you. There's a mission that you've had some traction on, a lot of traction on. And so that can drive you through that discomfort because it's like, okay, well, this is bigger than me. I have to step into this discomfort. There's just
100%.
no option not to.
That's right. And I think I always had that sense, even when I interviewed for my very first job, which was for a PT, and the job had been open for over a year, and they still wouldn't get me, HR still rejected my resume.
Mhm.
I still persisted because I had this innate sense that we were supposed to be there.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Today, we are venturing into the heart of conscious rebellion with a very special guest, Lindsey Vestal. Even before training as an OT, Lindsey saw an opportunity for occupational therapy to be at the heart of pelvic health. And she has been paving the way for OTs to become trained and established in this area of practice ever since. Now, even if pelvic health isn't your passion, you're going to get a lot out of this episode as we talk through Lindsey's story of standing up to claim OT's space, not only as a companion in this area of practice that's more traditionally been a physical therapy space, but asserting that OT has an important role in this area of practice as we bring our biopsychosocial approach, our understanding of the intersection between person, their pelvic function, their life, their occupations, and the environment. We're meant to be in pelvic health. This is a really special discussion for me because Lindsey and I are in constant contact as supporters in each other's journeys, as women, as mothers, as OTs, and as entrepreneurs who are doing things a little differently. We talk a lot about the courage to confront discomfort, the strength to trust in your path, and navigating all the feels that come up when we do brave things. So let me tell you a little bit more about Lindsey's career. She graduated as an OT from NYU in 2011 with the very clear goal of working in pelvic health. While many people, including some of her professors, said OTs can't work in pelvic health, she founded the Functional Pelvis, which was the first in-home pelvic health service in New York run by an OT. And now she teaches OTs how to become rockstar pelvic floor therapists. She's trained more than 1,000 OTs in becoming pelvic health therapists, and her goal is that 10,000 OTs are trained in pelvic health by 2030. She supports over 6,000 therapists through her Facebook group, OTs for Pelvic Health, which has a ton of free training, so make sure you check that out. And she has a podcast also called OTs in Pelvic Health. So if you're ready to be inspired, to challenge the norms, and to see what happens when you combine passion with purpose, and wrap it all up in compassionate support, then this episode is for you. Lindsey, I'm really so excited to have you here. You're somebody I talk to almost every day, and having you on the podcast seems like just a natural flow in what we do.
I am thrilled to be talking with you about conversations that have everything to do with us up-leveling ourselves as practitioners, as human beings, as people who support other OTs. This is stuff that I geek out on with you all the time. So I'm thrilled to be talking about this on your podcast today, Carlin.
So you are a bit of a pioneer, bit of a trailblazer. How do you like that? I know you have a program called OT Pioneers, so obviously you embrace those titles. But when somebody's reflecting it back to you, what's that like for you?
It feels I'm really proud. I am a bit of a rebel, I would say. Rebel's not quite the right word, but I really enjoy forging my own path. I'm
Mhm.
really comfortable and let's say comfortable with being uncomfortable in the unknown of
Mhm,
where something may go.
mhm,
And what helps me with that, because that is a scary feeling, absolutely, is the innate belief that I may have in it. So over a decade ago, I absolutely believe and still believe to this day, even more so, I would say, with a very strong conviction that OTs need to be in pelvic health.
mhm,
I actually actively sought out OT over PT as a vehicle to be a pelvic floor practitioner. And now that still is second guessed, but you better believe over a decade ago, it was not the norm. And so I had to be firmly rooted in answering people why I could do this. Then maybe after I answered it, going behind and going into my office or my bedroom and crying a little bit because I
mhm,
wasn't sure if I said it right or if they believed me. But despite all of those ups and downs, it gave me a thrill because I innately believed in it. And so when you say to me, you're a bit of a pioneer or a trailblazer, I feel proud because it's an authentic path that I've always believed in. And to now be on the other side of it and see where that conviction has taken me, I've had close to 900 students take my programs now. And I see just how much better the world is in pelvic health through the OT lens and how many people it's helped that I'm like, yeah, I'm proud. I'm really proud.
yeah, you should be. You should be. Well, and that ripple effect of all 900 therapists you've helped, that they've helped many more people. It's a really beautiful thing. And I don't think I realized that about your story, that pelvic health came first and then the choice of OT came second. I thought it was like many of us, sort of an evolution of finding our area of specialty.
Well, I always joke that my 2 areas are I'm like a double-horned unicorn because no one knows what OT is, and very few people know what pelvic floor therapy is. And so I guess I found one niche, and then I found the niche that was going to be the right vehicle because initially, I didn't know what OT was.
Mhm,
I knew what PT was. Any Main Street USA you drive down, you see the marquees, you inevitably know someone who's had PT, but you may have not known someone who has OT. There's not many marquees, there's not many drive-by storefronts. And so it wasn't until I was getting my volunteer hours in order to apply to PT school that I even learned what OT was.
mhm,
And when I did, it was a therapist who was working with a client who had a stroke, and they were working on memory that day. And the next day, I saw them in the gym together. And I thought, wait a second, with pelvic floor therapy, I want to work on the mind and the body. What is this profession? Because I need to know more about it. I
mhm,
immediately withdrew, I shadowed, and then I immediately withdrew my applications to PT school because I recognized it as being such an enriching, incredible way for me to bring what I felt pelvic floor therapy should be to my clients through that mental wellness perspective.
right, right, yes, because you're not just looking at a pelvis, you're looking at a whole person.
That's exactly right. And it's a part of the body that people have so much it's loaded for a lot of people. There's often shame. It's a very taboo part of the body that we just don't talk about at the dinner table or often with our closest friends. And so there really needs to be a strong emphasis on that therapeutic rapport, on out of the box thinking, on looking at maybe today we don't even to do anything with your pelvis. I'm very big into nervous system regulation and kind of feeling safe in your body because when we don't feel safe in our body and we're not operating from a place of ease and safety, we very often will tighten our pelvic floor and kind of grip, very much like we might grip our jaw or raise our shoulders. And so what happens is the pelvic floor kind of locks down. And so therefore blood doesn't flow through as well. It's not that lymph vessel that we want it to be. And it also doesn't work as optimally. And so just walking down the street, if you laugh, cough, or sneeze, a very common symptom might be leaking urine. And some people are quick to think, oh, it means I'm weak. It means I'm not strong enough. Actually, it might mean you're gripping too much and that part of the body doesn't have that perturbation that it needs to accommodate that increase in pressure. And that part of the body just has a few ways to get our attention and say, hey, we need another way here. Let's be curious about what else we can do. And so it leaks because it lets us know that it wants our attention to perhaps operate in a different way.
Awesome. Yes, I love how you look at things differently, and I think that's all, um, Like when you were describing yourself as a rebel earlier, I was thinking there are rebels who are reckless and impulsive, and you are not that brand of rebel. Knowing the types of conversations we have, you're a very intentional rebel. Like you have a mission, you have a purpose, you have an intention, you have a vision, and then you're also open to what comes and kind of responsive to what comes. But it is rebellious in and of itself. It's an OT in an area that's more emerging. It's emerging more and more every day thanks to you and your community and everything that you're doing and those ripple effects. But yeah, an intentional rebel, I would say.
Thank you for saying that because, I don't know if you noticed, but right when I said the word rebel, I kind of backpedaled
You did.
and I can't figure out why. And you just nailed it. It's that there is an association of a rebel being very reckless and maybe inconsiderate of other people. And that's the part that I really do disengage from. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to borrow that phrase,
You
intentional
bet.
rebel, because I do identify with that. And I feel like it gives us that essence of kind of two parts of the puzzle that I'm after.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. I remember it was last summer, I think, that you messaged and said you had recorded a podcast that was a bit of a manifesto and you were feeling really nervous to put that out into the world. I think there's kind of two things. I want to talk about sort of what that experience was like for you, but I think it's really important for people to hear that was scary for you because people assume that you're Lindsey Vestal and you're a pioneer in pelvic health. You're probably not nervous anymore. And no, that's not true. So tell us about it.
Oh my goodness, it's so not true. And Carlin, you were a big support for me during that time because you're right. I came out with a very vulnerable personal episode about, well, it was tied with the fact that my latest presentation was denied from the AOTA.
Yeah.
And, I had presented at the AOTA in 2019 before I had moved to Paris. And here I'm back in the States, it's 2023. And I'm thinking, well, our profile has raised. And we just got the first occupationally centered pelvic health community of practice passed through the AOTA. Certainly, they'll see the relevance here. And so I was very sad and I was very disappointed that the paper didn't get passed. And some of the language in it was like, oh, we don't see the relevance to OT here. We don't see that it's occupationally centered. And anyone that knows me knows that's such a tenet of mine. Like to be able to do pelvic health from that OT perspective, we always anchor back to that biopsychosocial approach. And look, that's not the way everyone practices as a pelvic floor therapist in OT, but that's what's right for me. And really anchoring into those OT roots is what really helps us flourish, in my opinion. So when I heard that reflected back to me, I was like, oh, I'm not being seen. And us as a profession isn't being seen. And when our national organization doesn't see that, it doesn't feel great. So this manifesto was tied into that experience and also reflected back as to why I feel this is such an amazing fit for OTs. And it was the first time I did anything like that. And I'll tell you why it was vulnerable. And it was because I felt like I left my audience down. I have built a very strong community. Our OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group now has 5,100 members. It's a very active group. I've gotten on live weekly for free trainings coming up on 3 years now. It's a community that it's such an inspiring part of my day. And so I felt like I let them down when my paper didn't get passed. I really felt like the community would think, okay, maybe we're not meant to be here, and I felt like all this momentum that I was helping, right? So my goal in 2023 is for OTs to really feel empowered. So anytime a new project comes across my lap, I put it through many filters, but one of the filters is this something that will empower OTs this year to really take action and to feel like, oh goodness, I've got this. We are meant to do this work. Because when our national organization doesn't support us, it does cause a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt, Sally.
Mhm.
And so I felt like maybe I stepped us backwards a little bit. And that didn't feel good since that's such a strong mission of mine. And so I was a very vulnerable moment and I recorded the episode and I think I called you right away, Carlin. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'll publish this. I don't know if I want to publish this. I mean, I had therapeutic crying when I finished that thing.
Mhm.
And actually, once we had our conversation and I felt settled again, I felt really good about publishing it. It
It was
was like,
so good. I remember listening to it before you sent it out. It was like, "Oh." This is good. This is going to be powerful.
It was cathartic,
Yeah.
and I heard from so many people that it actually helped empower them, and I was like, "Whoa, so I can empower people through that vulnerability," and that was a really big moment for me. I had no idea the power in.
Right. Because you tend to present as very enthusiastic and polished. And that was a little bit that was raw, right? Like, it was only, I think, 24 hours after your paper wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of emotion. One might say, "Don't do it yet," because of that, right? Like,
Yes,
you did
yes.
it. And that vulnerability is brave. It is brave, and it seemed to have more impact than had your paper been accepted.
As it turns out, I'm now presenting for it's called Conversations, it's a short course or Conversations That Matter. So it's not on the main agenda, but that same presentation is going to be there. And on top of that, I have the distinct honor of being part of the keynote with our president. And we're going to be talking about pelvic health. So in some ways, potentially the impact has grown even more than just being represented on the mainstream agenda. Like it's opened up a lot of opportunities. And so for anyone out there, I'd really love to share that sometimes that vulnerability not only can feel cathartic for us as individuals, which thankfully it did, but it also opened new doors that I would have never anticipated. Now, does that always happen? Can I guarantee that for everyone listening or for myself? I can't.
Hmm.
Will say that had I not taken that chance, certainly what I know now to be a reality wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. By the time this podcast comes out, AOTA, the conference will have already happened. So it'll be interesting to see how all that goes and what comes of that for you.
I'm excited.
So in our regular discussions, you and I chat on Voxer a lot. We support each other in a lot of our questions and doubts and celebrations and frustrations. And so I'm hearing self doubt continues even when you're a leader. And I experience this too. You help me with it all the time when I'm going, "Oh, I don't know about that. Maybe I shouldn't. What am I thinking?" And so it's great to have a peer to talk about and lift each other up or check in when somebody's gotten a little bit quiet for a few days. And I so appreciate that about you and about our friendship and how we can keep that real.
Oh, right back at you. I think it's been 2 years now that we've
Was
been
it? Wow.
been boxering together. So through international moves and lots of changes with both of our families, it's been a a thread of continuity for me that I'm really grateful. And, we've never met in person
No.
yet.
Yet.
And so for anyone who can kind of feel a connection with someone, whether it's in their profession or not, like, wow, what an incredibly informal vehicle for feeling anchored and grounded. I encourage people, technology is so easy these days to find friends regardless of where they are in the world that can always anchor you back to that authentic place. And I do think that's something that you really do for me is, encouraging me to come back to, I mean, even just in this conversation, right? Intentional rebel, helping me kind of frame where it is I want to go next, where it is I am now. And I think all of those reflective qualities just make sure that the day-to-day decisions feel smooth, feel aligned. And I think that's what helps me as an entrepreneur to ride the waves because there's a lot of waves with entrepreneurship. But when you can always come back and ask yourself, is this coming from a place where it anchors me back to my values? So, one of my big values is the abundance mindset. It's a solid place that I've been in for even when I had my private practice in New York City and I was seeing clients. And when I filter it through, I've mentioned two things that I filter my decisions through. Number one is this coming from that abundance mindset that is so authentically me? And is this going to help OTs and pelvic health in 2023 feel better about stepping into a role they may be uncertain about? Those are two values of mine that I always come back to and filter many decisions through because I know that when I can attach myself to those two things, my day feels, my week feels, my month feels so much more easeful.
Mm, totally. And that's what I do, right? That's exactly what I do with the OTs that I support. It's that clarifying values, sort of getting unstuck when we get stuck, getting clear when it's unclear, figuring out how to orient to those values or aligned actions. What's that next small step? And having a community is so impactful for exactly that because you can't see what you can't see. There's an analogy I talk about a lot of they in ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, they talk about it as two mountains, and you're on your mountain, and I'm on my mountain, and you're climbing your mountain, I'm climbing my mountain, but I can see things on your mountain that you can't see, and you can see things on my mountain that I can't see. And in Activate Vitality, we have a whole mountain range of people who can see all sorts of things and know each other's paths, know each other's strengths, know each other where each other kind of get tripped up, and having that community of people to lift you up from the inside. Because if we're feeling more in line, knowing who we are, knowing what we can do, and better able to manage our emotions that are going to inevitably come up, or the difficult thoughts that are going to inevitably come up, the more we can get out there and do the things. If we just focus on doing the things, sometimes we lose track of where we need to do the work.
Yeah, I absolutely love the way you describe that. And I think for me, one of the things that I do is I kind of check in with how decisions feel in my body.
Mhm.
I very much like operate from a somatic place. And so before I decide to do something or I'm wondering about something, especially when I'm sitting in those moments of self doubt, I really do pause to think and do a check in with like how it's landing with me. And if I feel a lightness or if I feel a heaviness, and that's an oversimplification, but that has been a great guiding principle for me personally is just the way it feels in my body when I say it out loud, when I run it by you, when I just think about it. And that has been a strong guiding light for me to kind of step into that.
How do you differentiate? Because when we're doing brave things, we can feel anxious, we can feel fearful, we can feel worried about judgment. What will they think? Am I even good enough? All of these things. Who am I to speak up about this thing? And that doesn't feel great in our bodies. And so, how do you differentiate when it's an anxious yes versus a no?
No, that's an excellent question. I'll be incredibly transparent and say that's still something that I'm working through.
Mhm.
But my initial response when you ask me that question is I will often ask, I'll play my own devil's advocate and I'll say the opposite. So let's say I'm leaning into, let's use the example for clarity that we just shared, which is whether or not I'm going to publish that podcast regarding the vulnerability of my paper not getting accepted. I might say to myself, okay, that was really raw. That was hard. I did it. I got my feelings out. I recorded it. So I'm not going to publish it. And I wait and listen for what that feels like for me.
Mm.
And then I'll say the other, okay, that was really raw. That was really hard. I'm going to publish it. I'm going to share it with my community and I'll sit with that. And sometimes I'm making it seem like it's really easy and this beacon of light shows this is what you need to do. It's not that simple. It's pretty nuanced, but I do have a feeling when I say that and I sit in it. Sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes I have to go for a walk on my trail or walk my new dog or, sometimes even just like turn off all the lights and tell my kids not to come in the room. Like sometimes I have to sit with it for a little bit. But I find that if I try both on, I'll
Mhm.
have a sense, even if it's a small sense,
Yeah.
where I need to go.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
anxiousness can be put aside and lead me to where it is I potentially may want to go.
There's a study done where they had people taking a test, university students taking a test, and they were all anxious. And they told half of them to tell themselves they were excited because it's a similar sensation in our body and it optimized their performance. It sort of because there's that performance thing with a bit of stress, right? Where under arousal leads to underperformance, over arousal leads to underperformance, but finding that just right level of activation and nerves, right? That helps us perform well. And I would imagine that for some people, it brought them from that over aroused, anxious state to just enough. It's not going to take it away, but that they performed better. And I think that's where I see a lot of OTs, new and experienced, when that nervousness comes up, they focus on getting rid of the nervousness and not on the action. That leaves them not doing the brave thing very often.
Mhm. one of the things you talk a lot about is like this feeling of not getting rid of the anxiousness. So it's going to go away. And in fact, sometimes when we think that we're, I don't know, not uh, I have the right word for it, but not a strong person or not the leader we want to show up to be, oh, we shouldn't be having these feelings, right? This negativity shouldn't be there. This self doubt shouldn't be there. And sometimes when we try to chase it away, it gets bigger. And that has definitely been my experience. And so, one of the things that you've talked a lot with me about is this idea of acknowledging it.
Mhm.
And that actually, for me, really quiets it. So, instead of trying to avoid it or ignore it, simply acknowledging it
Mm.
gives me that ability. And so, therefore, in this example, like saying, for instance, I just gave a talk at Creighton University, 2 weeks ago now, and
Yeah.
it was the largest in person talk I'd ever given. Part of it was because I've been away, I've been overseas the last couple of years, and I'm just starting to get back into speaking. And hopefully the audiences grow bigger, but this was the largest to date. And I had that tit for tat going on of
Yeah.
anxiousness versus excitement. And when I was able to acknowledge this is a feeling that, yeah, it's okay to have this, right? It's actually, it helped me put it into a welcomed guest in my
Mhm.
life and then turn that into that fuel of going, I have a potential, group of 150 students in front of me who I can fire up and help them more deeply understand the role of OTs in pelvic health. And even if just one of them now goes off and says, for instance, oh, did you know that pelvic floor physical therapy can help you? Even if they just go, did you know there's also occupational therapists that can do this? I did my job,
Mhm.
right? Because that's advocacy for our profession. And that's,
Yeah.
again, one of my big things for 2023. And of course, if one of them go on to become a pelvic floor therapist, I'm smitten beyond words. But even just that small sense of understanding that we don't have to take hours of continuing education, that we don't have to be a PT, and that we don't have to do internal exams. Those are
Mhm.
three kind of the big myths in my world of being a pelvic floor therapist.
Yeah.
I did my job. It was
Yeah.
so worth it. And I'm going to tell you throughout the hour and a half I talked, Carlin, I had to revisit this in my mind several times. It wasn't a switch that
Mm.
once I stepped into that place, it was gone.
Yeah.
There were these moments, and I shared this with you as well, that I even went to a point where I had to go off script because I
Yeah.
had a framework. It helps my brain organize. And at one
Yep.
point, that framework went out the door.
Yeah.
Actually did so much better. And it was a great learning experience for me because I got to juxtapose what the feeling of being on script gave me, which
Mhm.
historically centers me and grounds me, to the passion that I stepped into when I went off script.
Yes.
Never compare those two the way I did if they didn't happen within that hour and a half talk.
Right.
And so you better believe I had to pivot those feelings of nervousness turning anxiousness throughout that hour and a half many, many times,
Mm.
not only because I had to go off script, but also just because an hour and a half is a long time.
Mhm. Yes, yes. I remember us talking before you went about scripted talks versus unscripted and why we do either and the power of both. And so that was a really cool thing to hear when you got back that you went, wow, okay, it kind of leveled up in a lot of ways when you had to go off script. Yes, yes. And you became brave because I remember before that you said, well, I can't go without a script. Like I don't do no script sort of thing. Right.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're like, huh, I can. And it goes well. A lot I talk about with people too is that proving to yourself that we can try and talk ourselves out of our doubts and talk ourselves into other beliefs and talk ourselves out of our feelings. But the most powerful way to shift how we think or feel about something is to go do it and then see what happens. It's an experiment. Let's go try it. And sometimes we need to be forced into change, right? And I can think of how many times, right? The discomfort of staying the same needs to exceed the discomfort of change in order for us to move toward change, because ultimately we're drawn to comfort. And so it has to be, there's sort of a house burning down to step out of it. And I've grown in those moments so many times too. I can really relate to that.
Well, and it's that analysis paralysis a little bit too, where you can overthink yourself
Yeah.
out of a decision. And so I think that action is what ultimately teaches you. I mean, you and I think for years have talked about this idea of script versus off script
Yeah.
and the pros and cons of both, because there are
Yeah. There are.
absolutely pros and cons to both. And so we kind of have to find our rhythm and what feels right for us. And luckily, I'm privileged to have had a few opportunities to experiment with this. I mean, I go live weekly on my Facebook group, but it's very different being in person and that energy. So I think that when you are able to try, you get information that is often very different than what you think the information would be or where you think it's going to go. And so going from thinking to doing is one of the most informative steps that we can take towards that next level growth. And let's be really frank, I'm doing this, I've been supporting OT since 2018, and I want to keep growing.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay stagnant for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I want to keep attracting more and more OTs to this profession. And if I'm stagnant, that's not an attribute that people are going to be drawn to. But number two, I am innately fascinated by pelvic health. It is one of the most profound and complex, but yet quite simple in that beautiful OT way. And so when we give ourselves that opportunity to experiment and to continue to learn, we stay engaged and riveted and passionate. And
Yeah.
that serves as satisfaction in my day to day life. And it also serves me to do what my goal is. My goal is to help empower OTs to step into this if they feel called to. And I'm going to do that by pushing the envelope myself as well.
Yes. Yes. So there's that powerful mission for you that drives you, that this isn't just about you. There's a mission that you've had some traction on,
Mm.
a lot of traction on. And so that can drive you through that discomfort because it's like, okay, well, this is bigger than me. I have to step into this discomfort. There's just
100%.
no option not to.
That's right. And I think I always had that sense, even when I interviewed for my very first job, which was for a PT,
Mhm.
and the job had been open for over a year, and they still wouldn't get me, HR still rejected my resume.
Mhm.
I still persisted because I had this innate sense that we were supposed to be there. Of course, it was about me, and I needed to make that money.
Yeah.
I had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, right? Like I needed to contribute to my family. But there was this sense of justice in me. And this is Carlin, at this point, I had no idea I was going to be supporting OTs and building courses for them and creating summits and publishing a case study book this year. I mean, this was not a twinkle in my eye. This was
Yeah.
just, I want to do this and you are not going to stop me.
Yeah.
There's that intentional rebel. But yet it was this sense of, OTs, we need to be seen. Like this is legitimately our space. There is nothing more ADL than peeing, pooping, and intimacy. And
Yeah.
that's what pelvic floor therapist covers. And so even then there was this sense of, I don't know if the term is social justice or equality. I'm not too sure what the right term is, but I really felt this fighting sense in me, even not knowing what the future had for me about really earning respect for our profession.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes sense. Well, this has been super exciting. I have a few last questions for you, Lindsay, before we switch gears, because I know we're also going to record one for your podcast too. And yours will probably come out before mine because I'm a little behind in editing. My first question is, what does being brave mean to you?
Being brave to me means stepping outside of your comfort zone, whether that's big or small, to try something that you innately feel called to do. This can take so many forms. It could be starting in, a school for teaching OTs how to enter an emerging practice area. It could be showing up at your school to make sure your child gets services that they need. It could be telling your neighbor they drive too fast through your neighborhood. There's a lot of ways. And what I'm trying to get across is that it doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing. We can be brave in the smallest moments throughout our day. To be honest with you, me picking up an exercise routine, I'm now lifting kettlebells, to me is brave. So there are so many ways, but I think what it is stop, ask yourself, what is it I see for myself? What is it that I envision for myself? What is it that I truly feel called to do? And what is a step that I can make towards that direction that will ultimately move the boat that destination? And so being brave isn't always this cataclysmic fireworks show, but it is truly stepping into where you see yourself going and then taking the small steps in that direction, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes weekly, to feel you're closer to that place that you envision yourself being.
We call those towards moves in ACT. Exactly that, like kind of knowing what you're all about and what's that next smallest step. And sometimes that tiny step is the bravest thing you can do today. So do it.
And
Um,
that momentum builds.
mm, yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. What is something brave you've done recently?
Mm. So in 2023, we are going to have the second annual OTs and Pelvic Health Summit. I did the first one last year and it was all virtual, but this year it's going to be in person. And it's the first in person event that I have ever planned for OTs. And it's scary because I
Yeah,
want it to be perfect and
yeah,
I want it to be amazing. And I want us, again, lift up that sense of we belong here, we're leaders here. And I want that entire weekend to be infused with that.
yeah,
So it's an undertaking that it does scare me.
yeah.
uh, but I ultimately, again, it factors through, it filters through what I always come back to, my goals are. And it was a resounding yes when I asked myself if this was an undertaking I should do.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's good. That's really good. How would you like to see OTs get a little bit more brave in the coming years?
I would really like OTs to feel more confidence and clarity, regardless of their niche, to really understand and feel confident that despite how many people think what we do is so of the everyday, there is so much profound in the everyday. And so I think, we struggle with what is it OTs do? How is it they can help you? Do you help me get a job? And we've got all of those ongoing questions and issues. And I think sometimes that serves to undermine our confidence. And so what I really want to see is I don't care if it's perfecting your elevator speech, if it's, just stepping into more clarity with what it is that you do. But I want us to radiate in the confidence that there is no other profession like ours. We have a practice in the America, we have a practice framework. No other profession has a practice framework that outlines with such clarity and such eloquence what we do. I have a course called OT Elevate, the biopsychosocial approach to colorectal conditions. And in it, I talk about how actually nutrition is in our scope in the States. And that came from our practice framework. So it's this anchoring methodology that we should be so proud of because no other therapeutic profession has this. That is our guiding beacon. That actually, even though people don't know what we do, we have a document that if we kind of come back to, and it sounds super nerdy, but if you come back to it and just revisit sections of it and highlight parts of it, you will feel so anchored and so proud of ourselves as a profession because we actually do have these guiding principles that even anchor back to altruism and giving and charity, right? So, part of my summit on Saturday night, we have a function where we're donating all of our funds to the Fistula Foundation. Last year, all of the funds went to the Ukrainian Women's Organization. And this is part of our DNA. And so when we feel a little disillusioned or a little bit lost or a little bit misunderstood, which I would gather to say almost any OT listening to this podcast has felt at one point in their career, come back. Come back to some of these documents that truly do make us feel proud
Mhm.
to step into the profession that we are and to take that next step towards whether it's asking for a raise, getting a new job, taking a new course, I don't know, starting a new certification. Recognize that you have the ability to do this, and what we do is so profound.
Mm. Yes, I like that. Canada has updated our model as well, and I did a participate in a webinar recently, and I found it really empowering as well. And thought, oh, I guess I have to review this right when I was before I did it, and after I did it, I was like, heck yeah, this is what we do. And so I can totally appreciate that that framework gives confidence and power to what we do because it is easy to minimize the everyday problem solving we do, the practical nature of what we do. And that is powerful because it's so intimate into people's daily lives. So I know there are lots of places for people to connect with you. If people could pick one place that you want them to go to find you, what would be the one call to action for people to reach out to you?
Good question. I would say, can I kind of say two?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
sure.
reason, the reason I would say two is because some people are not on Facebook. And so I do love my OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group because I do, like I said, have over 150 episodes that you can watch. So if you're a little bit curious about what we do in pelvic health, go there and check those out. Carlin has been a guest on mine before. We talked about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So I've got business related topics, I've got diagnoses dives, I've got case studies, I've got nervous system regulation tools. But if you're not on Facebook or don't prefer to consume content that way, check out my podcast, which I will be doing it a year now as of July. And I think I have close to 50 episodes out there now. So you can also listen to very similar content and just kind of take in and understand with a little bit more clarity what our role is in pelvic health.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being a support in my life and my career and for being a guest here today.
Carlin, thank you. It's such an honor to not only be your friend, but to be a guest on your podcast. So thank you for having me.
What a journey we've been on today. Lindsey Vestal's story is a testament to what happens when we step out of our comfort zones and into our power. It's clear that when we lead with our hearts and our expertise, the impact can be monumental. I have a couple updates for you. So since recording this episode in the spring, yeah, I got a little behind in editing. I have help now, though. Thank you so much, Maddie. Lindsey has not only participated in a barrier-breaking talk with AOTA President Allison Stover at AOTA Inspire this past year, Allison at that point committed to prioritizing pelvic health in 2023. And they recorded an episode of the OTs and Pelvic Health podcast together. I'll link a few relevant episodes in the show notes. Lindsey and I had the opportunity to finally meet in person after hours and hours of Voxer and Zoom chats supporting each other. We met at the highly successful OTs and Public Health Summit in Arizona last year. I was grateful to speak on a panel with her husband, Doug Vestal, and OT Landy Peak about empowering OTs to do brave things. Lindsey and I are informal but vital supports in navigating the challenges that come up as we continue to innovate and be visible in our brave acts as OT trailblazers. Did you know what? I also do this formally as a service. Whether you're an emerging OT entrepreneur or a well-established and visible OT leader, you inevitably run into self-doubt, question your path, grapple with uncertainty, and need support as you continue to level up in your career. You don't want to level up anymore. You want to make a shift to different priorities and values alignment. If any of this is the case, I'd love to talk to you. I'm here to help you process, reflect, and revise. Just like Lindsey's on her mountain and I'm on mine, I can see things that you can't see as I listen to where you're struggling, what you are saying and what you're not saying, and how your energy shifts when you talk about the options and uncertainty. Digging deep with people is the only way I know how to show up. If you want a technical business strategy with a focus on tangible ROIs and KPIs that can be documented with numbers and charts in a spreadsheet, not the one you want to talk to. I know how to do that, but it's not my area of passion. Contact me if you want to dig into why certain parts of your business create deep resistance or feel misaligned with your adolescent awakening, your growth and evolution, and how navigating the competing demands of your personal goals, your family responsibilities, your long wait list, and how to really love your business and find flow. I'm the one you want to talk to then. I'll put a link to book a chat with me in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Brave OT podcast. If you love the show, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a rating or a review or a feedback. Any way you can do so in your podcast listening platform, or send the episode to a friend who needs to hear it. Post it on your social media and tag me. I'd love that. Remember, your voice and your work matter. And just like Lindsey, you have the potential to spark a revolution in whatever niche you're passionate about. As always, be brave, OTs.